All right, welcome back. We are WEBD6201 in the winter 2021 semester at Durham College. It's client-side scripting. This week we're talking about JavaScript events and event handling, and it's part 2 of our broadcast. Again, we're sitting at week 2, and we're just the last day. We talked a little bit about what an if is and the document object model. We kind of went into that a little bit. And we started talking about events with this ugly picture, as well as other stuff, event handling. We're going to go more into that today. And where we left off last time is where we're going to start moving, which is, and Nicholas asks, is the ICE just what we've been working on? Yes, it is. We're looking at week 2B. That's what we worked on last time. And again, I have a link for this up on GitHub for you guys. But really, if I press a control backtick, and if I do light server, then when this comes up, it's coming up in another window for me. But when it comes up, we have this, right? So that is where we last left off. And I'm just going to split the screen here so you guys can see side by side, which is, I guess, a way of developing. And I think this is kind of a good way of doing it, right? So we have our solution here, our project, and then we have over here our nav bar and stuff. This is a mobile first framework, Bootstrap, so you can see that you get these buttons and everything else. That's what we had from last time. One thing we didn't really explore too much was the whole responsive design thing. And so to some degree, we've done some kind of responsive design where it can grow and change. There's the breakpoint right there where it changes from kind of text to the hamburger, which is that little button on the right-hand side. So that's what we did last time. And in our code, we had this code right here. And I talked about how there's different ways of selecting. And one of the main things we talked about last time when it comes to DOM manipulation, the document object model, was selection. How do I select elements that are on my page? We talked about that last, right? So I said, like, you got to go in and then take a look at the element. And we want to be smart about things when it comes to planning, right? So a lot of times when we plan our HTML, we want to be able to target elements in the page. And there's different ways of doing that, right? So one of the most popular ways, like I talked about last day, was get element by ID. And I think this is where, we want to kind of use that methodology more often. The challenge with this, we also talked about, was there's different data types for JavaScript. And you can see that this one is just an HTML element. And if we target it a different way, it might define this in more detail. So we've kind of done a few things. And I also talked about using template strings a little bit and what that can do for us and what the danger is. One thing I don't want you to do, and I want to mention this again for next week's test. Remember that next week there's also going to be a test early on. I'll release it. It'll be, again, it's part of our schedule. And one thing that people do on the, and you see it all over the place online, is this document.write. So if I do document.write, right, this is a bad thing. Okay, so I would say, I've talked about a couple things to not ever do. Don't ever use var, and don't ever use document.write in general. And I want to point this out in general because document.write can be cool if you're replacing the entire document. But if I do a document.write as an example, and let's say I put some kind of template string, and if I just put in, let's say HTML, just like that by itself. And if I write that, so if I press save, it's gone. Everything is gone. The entire document has been overwritten. That's what document.write does. Please, whatever you do, never use document.write. It'll just wipe out your entire page. And notice what it did. It actually just killed everything, right? Now, where it's really good is if you're going to completely programmatically make the entire page somehow through some kind of algorithm where you want to load pieces of the page together, then document.write may not be a bad idea to some degree. The challenge is that if you notice, I have no more control. There is no more anything. I don't have even access to a JavaScript. It's gone, right? There's no link to it. No link to JavaScript. Can't do anything. Even if I put something else underneath here. So let's say, for example, I say document.write, and then I do a console log, and I do a hello world, right? And the console log directly afterwards. Okay, so now it's going to be a little bit asynchronous. So if I look at console log, hey, there's hello world, and there's my app started, but I got nothing, absolutely nothing in my document. It's gone, wiped out. So again, a little bit weird. Please don't ever use that unless there's some really good reason why you want to solve a problem, you want to wipe stuff out or whatever. Don't do it, Nicholas. Don't do it. it'll be too much trouble. So one of the things in your lab 1 that I said was I want you to start replacing text, and so we talked about kind of adding. So we did kind of an append child. There's other ways to append, like we talked about before. I can also do main content dot just append by itself. There's a difference between an append and an append child, by the way. So append child, if you notice, it says I'm going to append a child of type HTML paragraph element. That's what I'm going to append, right? Because that's what I'm passing to it. But if I do the same thing, let's say I want to append the same paragraph again, or another div tag. So let's say like new paragraph. And if I hover over this one, you can see that it just says append and then some kind of node, right? Be careful about what this is. So this is an HTML paragraph element, but I'm using append instead of append child. And if I save this, there's no real difference in terms of the output, because I only have, whenever I create an element, I only have one instance of that element ever, right? Unless I make a copy of it somehow. So if you notice in the paragraph, I still only have one paragraph 2. I don't have a second paragraph 2, right? As an example. One thing to note is that, but append does work. So if I was to, let's say, instead of append child, let's comment this out as an example. So I'm commenting out append child and using append instead. I still have the same effect. Here's paragraph 2, right? So that is something to keep in mind. What about if I want to also, insert something? So I want to insert a paragraph number 3. Let's undo this change, by the way. What if I want to insert a paragraph number 3 between paragraph 1 and 2 somehow, right? So let's go through the steps really quickly. I want to make a new paragraph, just like I did up here. Actually, let's use the code that's up here for paragraph 3, because I've already got it. So let's undo this code, right? So I'm just going to show this, right? And instead of inner HTML, let's not do this. So paragraph 3, if you notice, this is okay. Paragraph 3 can be a new paragraph, right? Paragraph 3 right now is only a string. Let's make a div tag to hold that string together. So what I could do is something that looks like this. So let paragraph div. Remember, a div tag is just a kind of a container that I can use. So if I call it paragraph div is equal to document.create element, right? And I want to make a div element, right? So it's just like a container. That's all it is, right? And here's my paragraph 3, which is this template string, right? Which is, it's also styled. It has a class. I can even give it a ID, right? So I can say ID is equal to paragraph 3. I can do all those things. And if you look at it, and let's go and maximize here, I can totally do this. I can make use of a template string, and I've created a div. Hear me out for a second. And now what I want to do is I want to append my paragraph 3 inside of my div. So that's going to be where it's going to be. So I say something like paragraph div dot, or I can say the inner HTML. This is another way of doing it. Inner HTML is equal to paragraph 3. All right, so I can do that. So then again, nothing is going to show up because I'm using the virtual DOM right now. I'm kind of in memory. This is still in memory. I haven't appended it anywhere in the page, right? Now, what my goal is, let's see if we cannot insert this between paragraph 1 and 2. So how do we do insertions? So for insertions, there's different ways of doing it. I have to target an element that I want to insert. And there's a couple of commands. One of them is before and another one is after. So let's target paragraph 2 because paragraph 2 exists already. So paragraph 2 is new paragraph, right? That's what it really is, right? So I'm going to say before new paragraph, right? As an example, I want to insert, my paragraph div. Okay, let's do that. So I want to say that new paragraph, and then I want to use, there's a couple ways. I want to say before, and then you can see that I have the same kind of functionality that I had with append, same kind of structure. So it says inserts nodes just before the node, whatever node you've chosen, all right, that kind of stuff, right? While replacing strings and nodes with equivalent text nodes, okay? That's pretty wordy, but what it does is if I go paragraph div, okay, so I want to insert this before, and if I go back to what it looks like, then you can see that this is the third paragraph. It is now between paragraph 2 and paragraph 1. Pretty slick. So again, just using before will do that for you. And then what if I wanted to put it equivalently? I can use after. So let's say, for example, I wanted to say, okay, instead of inserting before, so this is an example of inserting before a node. Okay, let's just comment that out. And let's do an example of inserting, after a node. So you can do before or after. Sometimes it's valuable to do one or the other depending on the problem you're trying to solve. So again, let's say, for example, instead of new paragraph, I want to insert it after, actually I want to insert it after new paragraph. So I want to say new paragraph. So I want to insert it after, and I can say after, and then paragraph div. Notice when I put the paragraph div, by the way, we'll see what it does. You can see that it's going to move now from here to there. And if we inspect the page, so we look inside of the body of the page and scroll down, inside the main content, you can see a couple of things that are different. One, I've got 2 paragraphs, but then I have this div tag. And the reason why I'm using a div tag is so I can contain this template string, right? Because it's just a string, right? It's not HTML. I'm turning it into HTML by using inner HTML. There's other ways to do this same thing, but I just wanted to point this out. That's why I'm doing it with a div or some kind of container tag. Okay, I don't have to use it. I could have just created another element, another paragraph element, and then use the inner HTML or the inner text and just put in whatever I want, right? Just like I did up here, but I'm just doing it a different way just to show you different ways of doing the same thing, because you might find other solutions online when you search for your lab 1. And you might say, well, I saw this online. What does it mean? Well, this is what it means. So here's insert after. So insert after actually just, we target the tag that you want or the element that you want, and then you kind of insert the element that you want to insert after it. So that's what that does. What about if I want to, so that's an insertion. Okay, we want to talk about insertion. And we've talked about creation. How about, it's not what I wanted to do. How about if I wanted to do deletions, right? Or removals. So if I want to do deletions, there's the main way to do that is, let's say I target an element as an example. Let's say I want to target my, paragraph 1. The paragraph 1 element, and I want to remove paragraph 1. Okay, so how would I do that? So again, I target the element, paragraph 1, and then I just put remove. And if I did this take a look over here. If I save, then you can see that paragraph 1 is gone. So you can remove elements, you can insert elements, you can insert before and after, you can create new elements, you can append child, does that. You can also, instead of remove, if I start typing remove, there's also remove child, a child of an object. But in order for me to remove child, I have to look at the parent element first, and then I got to target the child element. Okay, that's how that works. So I got to look at the parent element, so that would be main content, and then remove child, and the child that's part of it. It has to search for a child that's there. So in other words, instead of doing paragraph 1 element, this is one way of deleting. So the first way is remove itself. That's removing itself, right? Kind of stuff, right? The other way, and we'll say that this is, an example of removing single element. You can also do example of remove child. So you need to target the main content. Here's main content, and then you say, remove child, and you target the child element that you want to remove. And let's say again, we target paragraph 1 element. It's the same effect, but you just have to work from the parent element instead of from the element itself. Again, you'll see there's no difference here between one and the other. So why would I need all these different options? Well, because sometimes I don't have access to the element itself, right? I don't have access to it. There's no way of hooking into it, or it's difficult. And sometimes I have access to the parent element, and then what I want to do is I want to find or query the child element. I want to be able to target it somehow. And then whatever that child element is that I target with code, not just by one little thing like this, but let's say through some kind of algorithm, as long as I return a reference, this might be easier sometimes to remove the child as opposed to doing this, okay? To do this first one, okay? So again, solves different problems. So that's removal. And so now you've got kind of most of what you need to do your assignment, your lab 1, and do things like insertions and those kind of things. Remember, we can also change something. So one thing we haven't talked about is update. I want to update an element, and let's do that one. So insertions, creation, let's do an update. How do I update an element? We've kind of did that, but let's go into more details about that. So if I want to do an update or a modification, how do I do that? What do I do to modify this stuff? So one thing I can do when it comes to modifying the DOM in general, again, I need to target the element. So let's suppose that I want to change the inner text or the text content of paragraph 3 to something else, right? Or let's suppose I want to change the H1 tag that I have up here, right? And remember, is there any place that I've targeted that header? Well, not really, but let's see if we can target that header so it says something else. All right, so first of all, we have to select. So step 1, we need to select or target, hook into, you can say it different ways, the element that we want. So we know when I look at my HTML, if I'm looking at my HTML on this side, let's go into the body element, and you can see that inside the main element, so I have the main container, and then the first child is my, my header, right? I have access to my main content. Is there a way to target the first child? Let's try that. So main content, and I'm going to start typing child, and notice that it says children, and there's something also called first child. Right? There's first child, last child, children, and child nodes. There's a bunch of different ways of accessing children. So there's also first element child, lots of stuff that has child in it. And I just started typing cheat and it picked it up, right? So let's start by looking at first child. So first child, what it says is, it says that it returns the first child. It's a property that returns the first child. I don't have to use you know, and it's a child node. That's what it does. So that's the first child that I want to mess with, if you will. All right. So first child dot, and I want to use the text content of the first child. So my text content, and I want to say something like, you know, welcome home instead of welcome to WEBD6201. So welcome home. And if I did that and press save, if everything went well, then we should have welcome home. But notice that it didn't exactly do what I wanted to do. So, why? Why did, what the heck did it do? How did I change the text content of the first child? What is the first child in this thing? And I'm pointing this out because sometimes it's cryptic what happens. So I go to body, and let's inspect what happens. You always want to inspect what actually happened. And look what happened here. I have a text node. That's what I have. That's a hidden text node, an empty text node that's inside of my container, my main content container. That makes sense because every container has a default text node, pretty much, that's inside of it, right? So that's what I targeted, my first child. Okay, so that did that. Let's see what else we can do. So, all right, let's do some targeting. So again, so I type child. So I want to look at first child, first element child. Okay, what is first element child? Is there such a thing? So I've got a parent node. That's important. That's my main content. Must be a parent node. Then there's the first element child. Returns the first child that is an element and no otherwise. Okay, cool. So then I can say text content, right? And I can do the same thing, welcome home. And if I press save, then it actually changes the H1 tag this time. So that's the first element, different than the first child. First child is an actual hidden element. And so this is another way of selecting. And that's sometimes why it's good to do something that looks like this. Let's say I want to remove the first child of my main content. Then I can say, okay, this returns a reference to the first child. And I can take this part and insert it inside this method. And then I've removed that first child without actually knowing what it is. Or I can remove the last child element, whatever that is. And sometimes that's important if I want to, kind of take care of or remove. So this is the way of modification. I can target. First I need to target, and then I can change the text content. I can also change the inner HTML or the of the object as well. Remember, if I wanted to change everything in main content, let's say I wanted to change the whole thing. So this is one way of doing it. So one way, of course, is targeting. I need to target, select, and then modify, right? The other way to do it is if I want to modify the whole thing, sometimes, again, it's easier to use template strings. So again, I'm going to say main content, and I want to say, again, inner HTML. That's the way to go. And then just use a template string. So I want to modify everything in the inner HTML. And now this is on me to do properly. So again, let's suppose I want to make an H1 tag. And inside the H1 tag, I want to give it something like, an ID of, first headline or first heading. Follow me here for a second. And I want to say, welcome to WEBD6201. And I'll just put lab 1 just to show you that there's a difference with what we're doing. So this is the first content. If I save that, it wipes out everything, and you can see how it starts putting my heading, right? Now, if I look in the body tag, like I said before, you can start seeing that. So that's a way of modifying anything that's inside the main. I can keep adding to this because it's a template string. I can now put a paragraph tag, right? And I can give it an ID of first paragraph. What if I did that? Does this stuff up here that I targeted, this first paragraph, which is paragraph 1, let's call it paragraph 1 instead of first paragraph. Paragraph 1. There's nothing inside of it, but I mean, I targeted it up here, and then I wiped it out. All this stuff has been wiped out. Does that mean that this is still going to be empty? I save that, you can see sure enough, it is because it's in order, right? So if I go to body tag and I go to main, and now I can see that I've created my elements and inserted them just like this. So template strings are really powerful because you can actually add your own HTML in the order that you want here in JavaScript. And that's pretty good. I'm not going to suggest to you that this is always the best thing to do, but sometimes, again, it solves problems. Because remember, I can just put these strings together, and I forgot the semicolon. I can put these strings together here programmatically by using string manipulation to do this, because really, at the end of the day, it's just a string. And I'm just converting it with this inner HTML directive. That's what I'm doing, right? So again, I could say that this is my first paragraph again, right? And I can also insert a class. So you can say something like class is equal to, and I want to put some kind of font size, let's say 3, and I can do that. I can kind of target all the same things that I had before, and maybe a font weight of bold, right? You can do all those things. You can see how the effects take hold immediately, which is pretty cool, right? So again, that's another way to modify a whole range of things all at once. All right, so again, one of these methods is something that's going to help you with Lab 1. All right, so I'm just finishing off the basics of DOM manipulation. Any questions around this part? I know that there's a lot of different ways I'm showing to do the same thing, but it's important to know how to do all this stuff. And remember, there's good things and bad things, good ways and bad ways about doing stuff. And I encourage you to take a look at when you use the dot accessor method. Again, if I target an element and I use dot, Visual Studio Code provides a bunch of example code hinting for you that you don't have to look up. In the past, we had to go to W3 Schools. We had to look up online with Mozilla, you know, kind of the documentation. And there's still some great documentation online, but we can try and avoid some stuff by just, you know, using the code hinting that's here in our editor. Let's put this up on GitHub as an example. So I'm going to go to, just open up another terminal here and do git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say demonstrated DOM manipulation, which is kind of what we did in git put. So you have that those examples that you can use later on. One thing to note about Git and GitHub, I think also, and I don't know if you know this, but we'll pull it up, is whenever we use GitHub and we do a commit, so let's go into ICE1B, which is you guys, right? Whenever you do a commit and it tells you what I've done. So here's scripts and then demonstrated DOM manipulation. And if I go in here, it'll show you the script, right? It'll show you the app.js. Yay, that's all the stuff we just did. But what if I want to look at a previous version of my code? Well, I can go to commits, right, as an example. And let's say I don't want to look at this, but I want to look at added paragraphs to the main content, that commit. So notice that there is, if I click on it, it actually takes me and shows me changes that I made. That's one thing it does. So green is additions. Anything that's in red is deletions and that kind of stuff. All right, so that's pretty cool, right? So it tells you what you add and subtract. But on the right, notice that there's a couple of other buttons. One of them is this, browse the repository at this point in history. And another one is the commit number. So this is the commit number, right? Tells you the changes, again, just like before. This is a copy operation, and this is browse the whole repository. Now, if you notice, the repository is not at main. It's at this previous commit. And if I go into scripts now, I'm still at this previous commit. And if I look in app.js, you can see what I used to have the last time I committed, which is what we started with today. So guys, there's nothing you lose. In fact, it's just really great if it shows your development by going, you can step back and take a look at what's here, right through GitHub. And notice it says jump to, and you can start to whatever you want. if I click on this again, it's just going to take me back to main. That's the main branch. And so it shows you the main branch up here on GitHub. All right, just wanted to show you that. So just in case you want to look at that kind of stuff again. Okay, so this is great. And we've done some DOM manipulation, but your lab 1 calls for multiple pages. Let's do those pages now together. So I want to show you this. We'll do it in the ICE, and then I'll give you some hints on how to do it in your lab. I won't do everything in your lab because obviously some of it's for you, but we'll do some of it together. So do that together. So right now we have an index.html, and I certainly can copy paste this index.html, but the problem with doing that at this point, there's two problems, right? One is I have a navbar brand that shows navbar, and maybe I want to put WEBD6201 here. So that's like what's going to show up. That could also be your logo. You can replace the navbar brand with your own logo. I recommend that, by the way. Well, let's suppose it's WEBD6201. So I want to make that change. There's also in here where it says navbar brand, there's also an href. And remember, an href is just a link, and we don't have a link. It goes to hashtag. Hashtag does nothing right now. So let's change the hashtag to index.html because that's where it's going to go when you click on the WEBD6201 brand, the logo. And we don't have a logo for that, but if we did, that's where it would go. And at the same time, we want to modify all these links. So I know that home is going to be index.html. I know that about us is probably going to be something like about.html. We don't have this page yet, but we're going to plan. We're planning to get this page done. And here is projects. Well, again, instead of projects, I asked you to do products, right? But let's suppose it's projects.html because again, we're doing our own version. And here we're doing services, so services.html. And down here is contact.html. So all I'm doing here is I'm preparing to create these pages that I haven't made yet, okay? And why? Because I want to copy this whole thing, and I don't want to modify. If I make 4 more pages, I don't want to modify 20 items. That's a long time. I can just do it once, 4 items, and it's much better. The other thing I want to do is my title. My title right now says WEBD6201 Winter 2021 ICE 1. I want to change this to home. Okay, so there's a method to my madness here. All right, so home. I also want to put a comment. So in the header, we can put some comments in here. So this is like main header. We can also put some comments in here as well. This is our main nav. Main navigation, right? Because that's what it is. So site navigation. This is our main contents. So I'm doing this ahead of time because I don't want to comment on the other pages, right? Main contents. And this is our main footer. All right, so this is pretty cool. We've added some comments, not too crazy, but just enough. And now I think we're there. We're ready to do some copy pasting. Now, okay, remember what I said before. And if you've had me in other classes, what do I say? Do not repeat yourself. We're repeating ourselves here in a second. But we're going to find later on this semester that there's ways of not repeating ourselves and removing some of the same content we're going to use over and over again. All right, so just a note. So I want to copy paste this index.html. So copy it, Control C, and then paste it, paste it, paste it, paste it, paste it. So again, there's like, maybe I made too many. I'll delete the last one. I only need 5 pages, right? So my first copy is going to be, I'm going to rename it. So right click, rename. You can also press F2 to about.html. So again, F2, right? And we can say that it is projects.html, F2, right? And this is services.html, and then F2, and we're going to say contact.html. So all the same things that we've linked, we've kind of put those links in place. Let's do a couple of other things to each of these individual pages. So let's start with about. So on the top of the about page, I'm going to change this thing so the title says about. Okay, there we go. So that's going to say about. Again, you can do this programmatically too, and we'll show that. I also want to take away the active link and manually put it into this. So under nav link, I want to put active. You can do this programmatically too, but I want to show the active link. And then further down where it says welcome to WEBD6201, we'll just put it about us. I also want to wipe out the paragraph tag. So we don't need the paragraph tag in about us right now, right? And I want to do the same thing with contact. So contact, I'm going to go up to the top, change this to contact us or contact. Inside of our page, we want to remove the active from index and put it on contact. Active means it makes the link whiter. That's what it does, or just white. So it kind of indicates to the user where you are. That's what active does. And this is welcome. Instead of welcome to this, we're going to say contact us. We're going to work on the contact page a little bit today. Wipe out the paragraph tag and save. And keep doing. So projects, we'll do the same thing. So this is projects. And under projects, I'm going to do the same kind of idea. So again, remove the active tag from here, go down to the projects link and put it there, right? There's active. And then further down, I'm going to change this to our projects, right? So get rid of that. We don't need that for now. And there's a reason why I'm getting rid of it. And services, it's the last page. By the way, this structure that we're doing, this 5-page site is a very typical 5-page site you see on every major website in the world in some form or another, right? Because, you have some kind of services, you have some kind of contacts or products, an about us page, like basic pages. These are basics. And there's other ones too. For example, things like legal pages that you might have, a use policy, a privacy policy, and all that kind of stuff. You might have those at the bottom, some other links to give the the user kind of heads up on how you're going to use their data, with how you're going to track them, and all those kind of things. These are things that are very common. So our services. So we have our services. Let's go over and make sure it's right. Our services, our projects. Again, our services does not have a paragraph tag. Our projects has no paragraph in there. Index does have everything. Index is welcome to WEBD6201 with paragraph 1. Contact has contact us, no paragraph. And about has about us, no paragraph. I've also changed each of the titles. So about, contact, index is now home, projects is projects, and services is services. And I've done that. I'm showing you this again just to make sure that you're on the same page as me. All right, so this is a great place to put it up on GitHub. I haven't made any changes, but let's test it before we do it. And there's going to be issues. I planned that there's going to be issues, by the way. So let's take a look and see what the issues are. So I'm going to expand this page to maximize it a little bit. And let's watch down here when I look in the console. So right now in my web page, my home page, no problem. When I hit about, proper projects, services, it says everything we want, and contact, good. But my problem is that why is there no error on home? And why is there an error in about us, project, services, and contact? What do you think that is? I want you to think about it just for a second. I don't think it's difficult to understand, but what do you guys think? Why do you think there are errors on our page now? We've made copies of everything. We've removed stuff, right? But we get errors on the other pages, but not on the index page. Why do we have that? Definitely. Yeah, Alexis, that is perfectly. But it's definitely to do with JavaScript. But I want to see, can you understand what it has to do with? Okay, Scott says we're trying to select the paragraph that doesn't exist on those pages. Absolutely. And Calvin says we remove the paragraph element. Yeah, so you're all correct, Alexis too. It's something to do with JavaScript, and it has exactly to do with the fact that we removed the paragraph element from the other pages, but we're trying to target it. When we're trying to target it, we're going to get null if it doesn't exist, right? So there's a couple ways to to stop this from happening. One is to check to see if it exists. We can see if it's true. If we're going to get we can use an if statement for this. However, the other way is we're only using one thing to note as well for index.html and all the other pages. We're using a single scripts file. Some of you may be tempted to say that, well, why don't we just use different script files to do the same thing? But then, yes, we could do that. But wow, what a waste, right? I mean, imagine if we had to, it's the exact same structure, start, it's the exact same structure, window, add event listener. It's the exact same structure, or iffy. I mean, there's ways of kind of compartmentalizing a little bit, right? So we need a way of understanding which page we're on. So for now, let's do this. Let's wipe out all of this stuff by commenting it out. So we're going to say, just do a block comment. And at the bottom, we'll put another block comment. There we go. So we've blocked all of this out, right? The content out. And once we've done this now, let's see if we can figure out which page we're on. So we're going to go to console.log, and we're going to do I want to find the document and notice there's a lot of stuff in the document. We've only talked about create and get element by ID and query selector and all those kind of things, but there's other things that we have access to in the document itself. The document has a lot of properties. One of them is the body tag. If I want to get the body tag, I get everything inside the body, right? And I can also define the character set, and I can count the child elements. I can close the document. There's lots of stuff I can do here. I can check if a document contains something, and so on. I can do a lot of different kinds of creation, and so on. But I can also look at the document title. So if I scroll down, way down here for a property, title is a thing that I can get. And I want to use that. I want to use the document title to show me what the document title is. So if I was to do that, so every time I switch pages now, it should show me the document title. Let's see if I can do that. So notice it says about, home, projects, services, contact, right? Hey, if I can get the document title, there is a way of differentiating between which page I'm on, one page or the other. Now, this is only one way of doing this kind of thing, but this is a popular way, an easy way. So when I can do this, if I know I can look at the title, that means I can switch the title. Let's change our console log to a switch case statement. Switch case does exist in JavaScript, and it's similar to what you've seen in other languages. So I can do a switch. Switch is like an if, else, if, else, if. That's what it's like. And I can use case statements. So I can say, in case we're in the home page, you can use single quotes and double quotes here. It's up to you. Then I want to do something. In case I'm in the, the about page, then do something. And let me just reset my formatting here for a second. And in case I'm in the projects page, then do something. In case I'm in the services page, then do something. And finally, in case I'm in the contact page, then do something. Okay, so those are the things I can do. Let's format it in one. So what you can do is you can highlight an element here, and if you have prettier or one of these other things, I can write here and just say format selection, and it'll just format it nicely. So it'll put it in there instead of me doing it one thing at a time. Sometimes you may not like what it gives you, and that's fine. You can always change it to what you like. I like my curly braces on top of each other, not next to each other. That's just my functional style that I use. Some people don't agree with this, but the way I can do this is now that I have this, I can always comment this out and replace it with something else without commenting out my curly brace, which doesn't break my code. Okay, so yeah, so about. So that means I can target about, home, whatever I want to do here. And I have all this code that's inside of my start, and I can compartmentalize this code into different functions. So let's think about other functions that I can tap into up here. So let's define several functions that represent each of the pages. So I can say function display home, right? And I'm going to leave it blank for now. And I'm going to copy paste this function structure, right? You're going to see that I can paste the same function over and over again, and it's not going to complain, silly JavaScript. And what I want to do is display home, display about, display projects. You know where I'm going with this. And once I have these functions, then I can just plug them in here. So I can say something, well, when I go to home, I want to display home. And make sure you put the opening closing brace because you're calling a function. That's how you would call it, just like the same as in any other language. And again, I want to display about. I want to display projects, and so on. Now these functions are empty, but we're going to fill some of them up today. First one we're going to fill up is the home function. So we're going to take all this, cut it, which is going to make our start nice and nice, right? And I'm going to put it inside of home. And then I'm going to uncomment this block comment. Okay. And now you're going to see that we're not going to have issues anymore just by doing this. By compartmentalizing our code and switching according to title. Now this is, again, it's not the only way we can identify which page we're on. We can also use the URL. There's other ways as well. But we need to identify the page somehow. Okay. Sometimes people put their page in the body tag, you know, the identification of the page and so on. But we want to be able to identify one page from the other page somehow. And then, you know, we can use one JavaScript file to switch between different functions. We can also target other pages, other JavaScript pages, which we're going to do later on in this course. But again, home, about, project, services, and contact are here. They have their own display functions. We filled up the display function for home, and let's test this thing to make sure it all works. We planned it, and now contact us, no error. Home, we see the paragraphs, no error. Projects, no error. Services and contact, we're all good. All right. The keyboard shortcut for which next? Sorry, I missed that. The comment you put in the chat. Realigning code, right click and then reformat. So what you would do is, let's say, for example, I had some weird formatting like, I don't know, this, and I wanted to reformat this whole thing. Be careful, it'll do its own thing. By the way, when you use reformatting, I can highlight the code that I want, and I can right click, and then I can go format selection, or Control K, Control F, and then it'll format it the way it thinks it should be formatted. Notice that it put my string on the next line, but not in this case. It just does what it wants to do, right? So that's kind of, you know, what we did here. We have our display function, and we display whatever we want in home. So this is good. Let's put this up on GitHub, like I said. So we'll say git add dot git commit -m, and we'll say added about, projects, services, and contact pages. Git push, and that will push everything to GitHub. You should have now everything I just did. All right, so okay, I've done this, and this is a great start. And what you would do for your lab is you would add content. And again, I asked you guys to do it programmatically through scripts, as opposed to in the page. But what I want to work with you today on for this next part and for the last part of what we're doing today is I want to work on HTML5 forms in combination with JavaScript. And what do I do? So one thing to note about Visual Studio Code, it has collapsible regions. So you can see that there's a lot of stuff here. And I don't want to see, you know, kind of all this nav stuff. So I can just click on this little down arrow next to line 16 that I have for my nav. I don't want to touch my nav, and it'll just collapse that region. So I can just kind of look at it as a collapsed area. Nothing's wrong with doing that. Then it'll allow me to concentrate here and then not worry about swimming through all the code to get here. I don't care about the footer. It doesn't bother me. I could collapse that too. I could also collapse the header if that really bothers me. So I can do kind of minimize what I see, but I don't need to do that. This is enough. So what I want to do in my main content is underneath my H1 tag, I want to put a form, right? And instead of coding it myself again, I'm going to use Bootstrap. So let's do that. So I'm going to go to Bootstrap, and let's go to getbootstrap.com. And we're going to do some more Bootstrap now. We're going to go to Docs. And under Docs, on the left, there is Forms. And it's going to give you an example of, first of all, they've really spaced it out nicely. They have form control, checks and radio buttons, input groups, layouts, and a bunch of other stuff. But they also have this example form that I'm going to use right now because I want to make a contact form, which is one of your requirements, worth 10 marks on your lab, if I'm not wrong. So copy this and go back to my form and put it in, right? So if I put the form in, it kind of looks like this. I'm going to give some spaces here just so you can see what it looks like in main content. I'm going to save it, and then let's see what this looks like, you know, in our page. So again, I'm going to move that over there, and I'm going to move my page to the right, and it's kind of got issues, right? The form has issues, like it's like really large, right? And there's no formatting really at all. And so let's access another part of Bootstrap to fix this problem, because it is a problem, just formatting alone, which is layout. Let's talk about Bootstrap's layout a little bit. So I'm going to go to Bootstrap again. And sure, this does the form nicely, but there is an area here called layout. And under layout, if I go to breakpoints, one thing that Bootstrap does, again, is it's a mobile first CSS framework, right? Mobile first means it'll work on your phone nicely. It'll fit on your phone. You can program your pages using kind of CSS media queries in the background. We don't have to do our CSS media queries alone. Bootstrap does it for us. And it uses a flex grid as well to align objects. And it uses something called breakpoints. So breakpoints are parts of the page when at a certain X coordinate, width, let's say, the width of our page, if our width is small, so less than 576 pixels wide, then the breakpoint is called extra small. And there are other breakpoints. So small is SM, medium is MD, large is LG, and so on. And there's different break time, like, you know, parts of our width that it looks for. So if a page is, like example, bigger than 1200 pixels wide, like a regular desktop, let's say, or a large tablet, then you would be able to see extra large. And that means, and why would you want that? You want to be able to modify your content according to the size of your viewport. So if the viewport, a phone, you know, maybe your watch one day, or your glasses in the future, or something else that you're looking at web pages. If your viewport is very big, right, then you should align your text so it's bigger, right, so that you have more space, or you can align elements on the page that appear in different places, as opposed to maybe your layout the way it was on a small screen like a phone, right? And also, if I orient my phone differently, let's say if I have a portrait orientation, so up and down, like kind of orientation, and I change my orientation on my phone, my smartphone, to landscape orientation, so it's going left to right, it's going to have a wider dimension on the width, which means again I can modify my layout, to take advantage of that viewport change. So media queries is the way it's being done, and what Bootstrap does is it uses not just breakpoints, but it uses something called a grid, and it uses a 12-column grid by default. So what you can do to start using the 12-column grid, and what I mean by 12 columns is like take your entire page and divide it by 12 in terms of width. And it works to be about 8% or so of each column represents 8% of your screen, right? By the way, remember what I just said, 8%. That means if I have a small screen, it's still 8% of the screen, right? And this is good because what it allows you to do is align your content where you want it, right? Which is very nice. So the way to do that is to set up some kind of container element that has a class of row, and inside there, all the other elements could have classes of column. Notice that we're using column small. So these three are right next to each other. And because I use the same CSS class, column small, they appear right next to each other and they're the exact same size. Okay, so it talks about how it works here and everything else. And if I scroll down here, you can also do 2 columns. So I have 2 columns. So there's a row with 2 columns, and there's another row below it. So another row with 3 columns, and you can have another row with 5 columns or 6 columns or 10 columns, and it'll take the number of divisions and it'll split up your screen into that many. And then what you can do is you can make one column take up more space by saying something like, well, you know what, I want 5 columns for the middle, and I want to give a single column for the left, whatever's left over on the left, and an equal amount on the right, right? So I can put the middle, a number of columns in the middle that I want, right? So I can align the columns anywhere I like. I can also use offsets. So I can say, okay, I want to space in a certain amount of columns first, then have a bit of content, another bit of content, another bit of content, and then I want to spaces on the right-hand side as well. And the way to do that is you can kind of start talking about column medium auto. There's variable width content. I said that, okay, I want column large 2, right? So I want 2 columns here that are large for my left one out of 3. Column large 2 on the right, and column medium auto in the middle. So that's what that does. And you can also use other ones, right? So other ways of doing it. You can stack it horizontally. You can mix and match. You can also do things like, let me show you further down where they talk about nesting. I can nest a column inside of a column, inside of a row, inside of another row, and so on. And it's really great because it gives you a lot of control in terms of how we align stuff. So, so this is what we're going to be doing. And you can see that I can also use small for small screens. And I can also do, any kind of alignment that I want. I'm showing you this because this is going to give us a lot of control in terms of how we lay out our form, right? Because our form right now, as you saw, is, well, it's pretty large and there's no control, right? It's just taking up the entire width of the screen. And we don't want that, okay? So how do we do that? Well, inside of our code here, where we have our, in our contact page, right? Here's our contact page, here's our form. Let's make our form the row. So I have a whole row or that is our form. So I can say class is equal to row. So the whole row. I can also do individual rows for each element. That's totally up to me if I want to do that. I can do like row, 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 your boat. you know, kind of thing, right? I can do that. And I can create other divisions here as well for each of the elements here in the form. Or I can do it all at once. If I do that and press save, so far you don't see anything that happens except for this big button here happens, right? So this is like, okay, interesting. It kind of made this massive button here. Why? Because it's taking up the entire row. I haven't said how many columns I want. And if I don't specify how many columns, then it takes up the entire row. Let me show you that. Like so, takes up the entire row. So again, control, right, is what we're talking about. The other option is, let me undo that change. So I can just take away the row from here and put my form inside of a row itself, inside of a div tag. So I can say div with a class of row and then press tab. And what I want to do is I want to take my entire form, right, and basically move it inside there, right? And if I did that, then it's going to look different. My button stays small, and when I move my stuff around, it's still large, but now I'm starting to have a little bit more control over how I do stuff. So what I can do, right, with this stuff is I can start thinking about how many columns do I want in the middle for a large page. Maybe do I want 8 columns? And do I want 2 on the left and 2 on the right? So I can kind of specify that, right? I can say, well, I want, so my form then, instead of being rows, is I can say that my class is column-8. So I can have 8 columns. And if I did this, it restricts me to 8 columns on the page. And that doesn't matter whether it's a large page or a small page. So let me show you that. So if it's a large page, I got 8 columns. And it's still going to have 8 proportional columns no matter how big it is. Okay. We can also specify a, like we said, a column offset or something like that. So going back to Bootstrap here, again, you can see I want some kind of spacing. So this is column medium 4 on the right, right? So column medium 4 I can specify. And you can also specify different size classes depending on if you're responding to different sizes, right? I want to specify different things. So, and this is pretty cool, right? Because what allows us to do is I want to be able to, kind of space in there on the left-hand side. And column medium auto isn't necessarily a bad way of doing things. Notice also that it says row justify content medium center. So what this is doing is it's justifying everything in the middle. It's not a bad idea for us, right? And then using column medium. So when it's a medium size, it's column medium, content in the middle. So using the same structure here. So let's try that instead. So again, where it says row, and I'm spending time doing this because you are going to worry about some kind of alignment for your pages too, right? So row, like it says here, I want to align it. I want to align the row where it says justify content medium center. Okay, so I'll put that in there. And then in my column, right, what I want to specify is column medium auto. So column, instead of column 8, column medium auto. And then let's see what that effect is. There is no column on the left or column on the right, just one big column that I'm using for this stuff, right? I'm missing a J. Where did I miss a J? I am missing a J? In justified. That would be bad. That means it won't target properly. Let's go into this and see what I got. So now this is what I'm looking at. Column medium auto. And so it puts it in the middle. Look at that, right? But if it's too small, right? Like that's like super small. But what it does, it keeps it in the middle no matter what I do, right? Which is kind of cool. But if I go to like a smaller breakpoint, once it comes out of medium and goes into small, look at that. It jumps to like the whole size of the page, which is kind of cool, right? All right. So that's medium center, right? And what about if I change it to large center? So column medium auto, I want to change to column large auto as an example. And then let's see what happens now. So here's thing, and you can see now it is a point in time where I come to a medium size where it's like the whole size. Look at that, right? And if I go smaller, it goes, kind of adjusted to the whole size as well. And then we can mix and match, right? So we can say that, instead of column, large auto for the whole thing, let's suppose I want a specific number of columns. So 10. I always want 10 columns. So I can also do this. I can say that there's always 10 columns out of 12, no matter what I do. So that's 10 columns out of 12. Or I'm always going to say there's always 8 columns out of 12. 8 columns out of 12, right? There's 8 columns out of 12. That's starting to look a little better, right? And even if I'm here, I can also specify that breakpoint. So I can say column large 8. I also want to do column medium 8. I can mix and match, right? And then I can say when I'm small screen, column small 10. So I want to say the whole space if I can. If I did this, it kind of modifies how it is across different breakpoints. So I can say again, you can see that that works okay. As I get bigger, I have more space, and as I get smaller, I have less space, depending on where the breakpoint is, right? So again, I can respond to the screen a little bit, the way I want it to. And if I don't like this, let's say, for example, I say, well, column medium 8, that's not enough room, so let's make that 10. Then you can see that that's going to span out a little bit more. Column medium 10, column large 8, column small 10. So that might be better, right? And maybe, even in large, when I go to 8 columns, it's still pretty large, right? I think it looks okay when it comes to medium. I think medium looks okay. Small is good. Extra small is the whole space, which is okay. It doesn't change from this too much. I think my biggest problem is large. I think large is too large, and you can even space that even closer. Let's make it 6. So column on the large side is 6, but when I hit the medium, I'm good. And then you can see that it's not bad in terms of sizing. So this is like a bit of what we call adaptive design or responsive design, and it'll adapt to our screen size. And I think it's important to understand how that works with breakpoints on the width of your screen and the size class that we're using. We'll go more into that maybe later on this semester, but that's it for today for that stuff. All right, so we have our stuff. Now let's modify our code. So I don't care about what this says. Let's start building our contact page. So I want to get rid of where it says, we'll never share your email address with anyone. Let's get rid of that. We don't care about that. And we're not going to use a password, so let's get rid of that. And we're not going to use a checkbox, so let's get rid of that. All right, so those things are done. We are going to do this, but one thing I want to talk about is this is a form group. This thing right here, instead of an MB3. Again, if I go back to forms, so I want to go back to my forms now for a second. And if I go to overview, you can see that there's form control and there's input groups and so on, right? So if I scroll down, it talks about form text, and I can disable forms. It talks about accessibility and so on. Form control basically talks about input and text areas. All right, right now, and you can see how that works. File input, if I want to input from file systems or a data list or something like that. So this is where it is. Range input groups. So here's input groups, where it shows you how to do different input groups itself. So here's a div with a class of input group, right? Input group. And then I have a span with some input group text, right? And the input group text has an ID of basic add-on 1 with this ampersand sign, right? I want to show you this because this input group text stuff, what it does is it creates these, kind of a interesting way of displaying everything, right? So username, a vanity URL if you want to put that in there, and a bunch of other stuff. So this is pretty cool. If you want to use whatever you want in here, you can put the input groups together. So that's pretty cool. And it gives you this sizing for small, medium, and large. And it gives you the example of how that works. So input group small, input group, and input group large. So it gives you kind of larger input groups. And all the input group is just, a way of putting this in there, right? So that avoids kind of the way we would do a label on the top and then some kind of input area on the right. And I like this a little bit more. I did it differently in the other class, but I think I want to use input groups as opposed to the way we did it before. So what I want to do then is I want to replace the text. I want to grab this medium, the default size, where it says, this is my input group text, right? And then the input itself is the thing that I want. Okay, this is what I want. So let's grab this whole thing. And again, I'm kind of in input group and forms, and I'm about halfway down where I have sizing. And I'm just going to grab this part. One part is also floating labels, which is kind of cool. I want to talk about this a little bit. So we have text areas, and I have comments, and talks about layouts for that. That's kind of cool. Talks about layout for forms a lot and how you can have a label and another label and some forms. You can have a form grid. You can include form gutters and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. You can specify how much space you want in the gutter in the row of the form, which is pretty cool, which gives you spacing around the form. And you can make horizontal forms as well as vertical forms. So really, really cool in terms of the way it looks. But I want to get back to that input group, like I said before, which is under sizing. So I want to go back to our page, and let's change how this looks now in our form group. So again, I want to replace all this with an input group and see what that looks like. And you can see right now I have this default and then contact page and then this thing here over here. Right. So what I want to do is where it says default in the page and where it says input group sizing default, this is going to stay. That's the ID. Input group text is the class. And then the default is going to go to kind of like your full name or your, so kind of like your contact name or your name, that kind of stuff. So full name. And if I did that, you can see now that it says full name, and it gives us an idea of what we're going to put in here. That's what we're going to put in, the full name of a person, right? And then this part is interesting. The type is text. This is what the keyboard is going to look like on mobile devices. There's different types, text, tel, and so on. Class is form control. ARIA label is sizing example input. You would want to put in something like full name. That's the ARIA label. Full name. ARIA described by is the same thing. You want to put in, full name input, right? So this ARIA, remember, it's like accessibility. So that way, if someone's using a screen reader, it'll read this out to them. My button is not going to be submit, but rather it's going to be send. I'm going to make it a button primary, button large. So I'll make it a larger button, right? So if I just press save on that and I go back, you can see it's a larger button. Starting to look better. And what I also need here is I want to make it so that you must put in a full name when you kind of thing. And sometimes instead of full name, you can also put contact name, contact number instead of full name. But let's put full name in there. We'll make this required. So we'll say that you can't submit the form unless you have a name, right? So if I go click send, then it'll say, no, you need to fill out this field. And it says fill out this field because I put in this required attribute inside the input element, right? And I also want to put in a name and an ID for this input element. So the ID for this thing is a way I can target it. I want to be always able to target elements, right? So I want to say that this is the first name, right? Inside my full name, and that's my full name input, right? Full name. I also want to say that my name, if you put the name attribute, my name is also full name. So what name is the variable that gets. I'm just breaking it across two lines here. It's just one big thing. My name is the variable that's going to basically be used for PHP if you're using a PHP backend, or for JavaScript on the JavaScript side, that I can do something. It'll get the information that I input here, and it'll input it inside of a variable called full name in my JavaScript. That's what name is. Okay. So that is what I've got here. And again, it won't submit unless I put in some kind of value like T. If I put T in there, that's enough for it. And if I click send, it'll submit the form, but then it's gone. We'll talk about how to stop that. I also want to put some kind of I tag in here. So, you know, what it's going to look like is an I tag with the class of FAS, FA dash, let's say envelope, right? And then FA large, right? So I want to try and put that I tag in there. Remember, the I tag is for font awesome, so it looks kind of nice. I'm forming out my, you know, my little form right now, so it's kind of looking good, or okay anyway. And I also want a button, another button, and let's just copy paste this button. And the button, instead of being a submit button, is going to be a reset button. That's the type. Reset, what it does, it clears the form. Instead of my button being primary colors, which is blue, let's make it a warning. We'll make it large. Instead of it being an envelope, we'll make it an undo. So, and then instead of send, we'll say cancel. Right? So if I press save and I go back, you can see now that I have this yellow cancel button and a blue send button. Again, what cancel does is if I type Tom and then click cancel, it just erases and it doesn't submit the form. Okay. If you don't like the button sizes and you think that's too big, you can always reduce them, right? So you can always go back here to button large. And I think now looking at it with both buttons, maybe it's too big. So I can go back from my size class perspective and save it and go back and, you know, maybe that's a little bit sleeker, a little bit nicer, right? Are you with me? So again, I'm trying to give you a sense of building forms here. I'm going to build the form up. Again, content is king. I need to have content, and I'm helping you with your lab 1 and your in-class exercise. All right, so let's grab this whole thing now. Now that I have an example of an input, let's grab this whole thing and add some other ones. So let's put in another one. And instead of it being full name, let's put email. Right, so email is the thing. Instead of full name, it's going to be email address. That's the ID. The name is going to be email address. It's going to be required. The text, instead of it being text, notice I can put in control space and I can choose email as a text type, right? So again, another kind of keyboard on mobile devices, it'll come up with a keyboard that has an @ symbol only, but not the numbers, as an example, necessarily. Form control, this will be, the ARIA label will be email address, and then email address input is kind of what it's described by, right? So there it is. And then, so that's, you know, first full name, email, and maybe a contact number. And maybe I want the contact number before the email address. Let's do that. So put it in here. So we'll say this is a contact number. And this will be contact number. I'm not going to make the message. I'll leave that for you. There's got to be something for you for your lab, right? So let's do this. So this is contact number. And so will this. This will be contact number input. And instead of the text being email, it should be tel or telephone, right? So a contact number. And then when I look at it, the form, then I can see that I have something that looks like this. So full name, contact number, email address, and I have some fields. One thing that this kind of form does is it's not equal. It's not equally, input. There's no equal amounts of stuff. I could also change these things to symbols, right? So instead of making it look like full name, contact number, email, I can make symbols in here, which sometimes is a little bit more descriptive in some ways. One thing is that if I make this grow or make it shrink, it's all good. It's not a problem at all. All right, so I've made a basic form, and again, it's maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But that's kind of the thing. You can also put cell number in here, but contact number is pretty descriptive. If you wanted to make it more or less the same size, adding spaces isn't going to do it. So if I put like a bunch of spaces there, typically, you're going to see that it doesn't do anything when I add spaces. That doesn't, really solve my problem, right? So you can't like add additional spaces or anything like that. You'd have to add CSS, target this with these fields, with CSS in order for you to do that, right? So just keep that in mind. All right, so that's not something that you can do here. And maybe we can look at Bootstrap later and figure out a way of making it all aligned. Actually, let's just take a quick peek now before we move on. So you can see that it's different sizes, and it's really used for stuff like this. So username, and then the server, you put like the username, and the @ symbol would be your @com, your email address here. So you can, have input groups that work together, checkboxes, and, kind of multiple input groups, first name and last name, one next to the other. That's pretty cool. To work that way, and button add-ons. So you can actually have a button right next to it, as opposed to in the whole form, as opposed to below it, like I did that, and drop downs and a bunch of stuff. But one thing it doesn't, and even segmented controls. So I can put a drop down and some segments and something else. I like those. But one thing it doesn't talk about is alignment, right? So there is no alignment here for things, but it does talk about layout. Right, so maybe there's something in our, in something we can do is put in some kind of alignment. Let's use a gutter. I do like gutter. So where it says row, we can put a gutter 3. I kind of like that gutter 3 idea for the row. Okay, and it's going to create a gutter around everything. So that will be under where it says row up here. We can say I also want a gutter of 3, a gutter of 3, and then it creates spacing. That's what it does, right? Okay, so let's move on. So now that we have our form layout, let's put this up on GitHub. So again, we go to commands. We're going to say git add dot git commit -m. We'll say added basic contact form. It's not really complete yet. You have to do the rest. Git push. And it's pushing things up. Yay. And what I want to do now is in my app.js, I want to target in my, where it says my display contact. So my display contact is how I'm going to modify my contact page, right? And what I want to do is I want to confirm that, here's the events that we're targeting. I want to confirm that at least I have 2 characters in my first name or my contact name, because maybe I want to put in a name like Al, right? Or 3 characters, Tom. I don't want to put my full name. I just want to put like, 2 characters. You can also specify how long you want it, right? So one is I need to target my element that I want to validate. I want to do some validation here. So let's do some form validation, right? part of it is being done by HTML5. So if I press send, then it doesn't send, right? Because it needs some stuff. But if I fill in T and then press send, it's okay, right? It doesn't care. I'll go to the next one, right? And if I put my contact number and if I pull in 416 and nothing else, then if I press send, it'll go to the next one. So that doesn't really satisfy my requirements. And we'll talk about using regular expressions next week. But under email, same thing. If I put in like Tom, that's not good enough. It says like, no, you need an @ symbol. But if I put Tom @ and then that's, you know, and something else, Tom @ and then a with no com, it will do it, right? So it doesn't really do all the validation. It checks some basics, and you can turn off HTML5 validation with code, which is dangerous, right? So that's why we always do validation both on the front end and on the back end. But for now, let's do some form validation, some simple stuff. So I want to target my element that I want to hit first. So let's hit the first name element. I know that it's, or full name. So I want to say let full name equals to document.getElementById. We know that we has an ID of full name, and that is the element that we're targeting. And I want to make an event happen. I want to say that full name, we've seen other kinds of event, the click event, we've seen that, .add event listener. And we want to say that when we're listening for the blur event, so blur means that if I move away from, I tab out or I click on something else, when I move away from full name, when I move away from it, if this happens, it generates an event. And then I can use my event syntax. So some kind of anonymous function. I'm just going to use the old way of doing it. Here's my anonymous function. And inside the event, so here I'm adding an event, which is the blur event. And I'm saying, okay, if on blur, basically, is what I'm saying, then do something. What am I going to do when it's blurred? Well, I want to check to see if I at least have 2 characters. So I can say if, and full name is something that I'm targeting. So I'm going to say full name dot value, not node value, but value, right? Value is the value that's being held inside that input, okay? Full name dot value dot length, because the value is a string. Everything then comes from our form as a string. So the length of the value that I have in my form, if the length is less than 2, let's say, well, I want to not allow you to leave that form element. I want you to go back to that form element, and I want to say full name dot focus. And what full name focus does is it refocuses your control back onto that form again. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm here in full name, and I put T, and I press tab, and I try and click somewhere, and it's just not working. I can't move away from it, but it's not giving us Y. It's just hovering there, right? So what I can do is to make sure that they know that something is wrong. There's 2 things I can do. One, I can put in full name dot, and then I want to select the full name. Select, not query selector, but select, what it does is it selects the entire content of full name, right? So again, here's full name, and I saved, and I'm going to go here and press T and then tab, and then it selects it. It says, you know, something is wrong. It selected it. And then I have to type at least 2 characters, and then I'm okay to move to the next one. No problem. So that's kind of full name focus and full name select. And these are controls that we can use to control input in my form. Blur is the event that I'm using. You can also use changed. There's other ones, other controls. Hover, mouse over, mouse out. We saw before. Mouse over, mouse out. We can also use click. So those are the different ones we can use. And I'm going to use click on the send button in a second. I also want a way to give the user feedback that something went wrong, right? So in the form itself, under the contact us area, let's go back to that contact.html. And let's make an area that's underneath the contact us area that is hidden, Okay, so we're going to say that there's a div tag, and the div tag is going to be I'm going to have an ID of kind of like a message area. This is a little message area that we're going to have, right? And by default, I want this div tag with an ID of message area. When we enter the form, I want it to be it's not going to have anything inside of it, right? It's going to be hidden, right? So I want to hide this area, right? So how do I hide stuff? I want to hide and show. So I go back to this, and what about if I want to hide an element, right? So let's do that right away. So before form validation, right, I want to say, let's say, let full name, sorry, we'll say let message area equals to document.get element by ID, and we'll say message area. So message area we're going to have. And what I want to say by default is message area is hidden, right? So if you notice hidden is a Boolean, right? So I got to specify what it is. Hidden is like true is what I want to say. So message area hidden is true. And just to show you this, because you're not going to see a difference here, right? In the message area, let's put some message in here. Like here's my default message, right? So you can see now there's no default message, right? But if I took away that control, let's say I just commented this out, right? Then you can see that there's my default message comes up. I also want to make my default message, let's leave it hidden for now. Let's make my default message for my message area. Let's add a class to it. So contact, if you look at the contact.html again, in my message area, let's add a class that's equal to alert dash danger. Okay, alert danger. And alert danger, what it does, it makes that message area look like this, like a red message area that comes up. Okay, and we can see what alerts look like. So if on the left, and again, I know we're timing out, so bear with me. On the left, you know, we have, sorry, it might be under components. Here's an alert of what it looks like. So I can make different alerts, a blue alert, a green alert, and so on. And you can specify what it looks like, alert primary, right? So let's put alert first. I missed that part. So let's see what that looks like when I do alert. Under the message area, I can say alert danger. And if I look and see what that does now, you can see that it's kind of a big alert. I like that. It's kind of looking at what it looks like, right? For the alert. And this is cool. You can change the link color to different colors as well. And it also talks about how to dismiss an alert and a bunch of other stuff. We're going to do that with code anyway. Okay. So this is what the message would look like, but we don't want to see a message here at all unless the user's done something wrong, right? So what we can do is we can go into app.js and we can hide the message area at first. So the message area is hidden, right? And then we're going to say is if we do this, if the value is less than 10 and whatever, then we're good. We're going to say that message area hidden is equal to false. So we're going to show the message area, right? So again, right now we're hiding it. It's true. And if I press T and I try and skip over, it's going to say some kind of message that's going to come up, and it's going to highlight my thing. And then what I can say is I can change the message area. So message area, and I can say that the inner text or the text content, which is what I want to change, is something like please enter at least 2 characters, or I don't know, an appropriate name. Please enter an appropriate name, right? Something like that. So again, you can see that if I press T and then tab, it'll say, please enter an appropriate name. And if I do that, if I press Tom and then tab away, I want it to clear. And the way to do that is to say, if I'm blurring and everything is bad, then do this. However, if everything is good, then do an else statement. If everything is good, then make sure that the message hidden is true, right? Make sense? So now what I can do is I can say, okay, cool, Tom, right? And I'm good, right? But if I go T, it's going to say appropriate name, enter an appropriate name. If I put Tom, it's gone, right? So that's kind of how we can add interesting ways of interesting validation methodology to the form. I'm not going to do the other ones. You can also validate contact numbers and emails and all this stuff. And we're going to do something different next week with regular expressions. But for now, what I want to do is I want to talk about this send button. If I want to capture the data that I'm getting from the form, let's suppose I keep entering stuff, right? If I press send, it's gone. It's just going to like literally go poof, and it's over, right? That's what's going to happen. And that's a problem, right? That's an issue that happens. Also notice that by default, because I made my area, my text area, when I pressed the send button, it went like, you know, the message area went red because it showed it briefly. That's also bad. It's giving a negative message to the user. So I got to make sure that that changes. So let's do another event. And the way to do that, we need to target the button, the send button. So we're going to go into the contact.html form. And we have no ID for the button. Let's add them in. So I'll say my button ID for the send button. We'll just call it the send button. And my ID for the cancel button, just in case I want to hook into it. I'm not probably going to do that, but let's say the cancel button is pressed, right? So I want to target the send button. Let's do that now with app.js. We can say something like, okay, let send button equal to document.getElementById and send button. And what we want to do afterwards, again, this is one command at a time. We can do other ways too. I want to say send button.add event listener. And I want to listen for the click events. When the event is clicked, I want to have a new function. And this time I want to pass an event argument into the function, which by the way, it's implicitly there anyway. So it means it's always there, but I'm just passing it in now. And I want to say that when I click the event, when I click this thing, I want to say event.preventdefault. So what preventdefault does, if you hover over it, it says, if invoked, when the cancelable attribute value is true, and while executing a listener for event with passive set to false, signals to the operation that caused the event to be dispatched. You know, again, that it needs to be canceled. So I can cancel the send form event altogether. Yours is in hiding. Again, make sure it says message area hidden is true and that it's a div tag. I'll put this up on GitHub in a sec. So yeah, so this is kind of what I want to do. So what this does is this, if I go to here now, and if I click send, nothing happens. I get no validation at all, right? I do have this though. This still works, right? And when I do this and I switch over, you know, I'm good, right? I can switch over to this, right? So this is okay, right? When I do this, but there's no other validation. The default validation that I have for the required part is gone. Okay. So again, we're talking about some simple validation. Next time we'll talk more. So what I want to do is I want to take the data that I have here when everything is good and maybe throw it into the console window. You know, let's see if I can do that. So I'm going to say something like console log, and I want to pull out the full name, right, dot value, as well as, let's do the other ones, even though I haven't defined them. Remember I said that full name, and there's also, we talked about contact number and email address. Those are name attributes. Let's try that. So I want to say contact number dot value and console log email address dot value. All right, so I want to do that. And I don't have contact number or email address. I never defined it in here, but let's see if it's going to work anyway. So if I go here and I start typing, so Tom, and then 416-555-5555, tom@example.com. Let's make Tom Smith. Who knows? I'm Tom Smith now. And if I click send, then I get all that detail. Look at that. Even though I never defined contact number or email, but because I have contact number and email address inside of my browser and it's part of my form, I'm good. It'll still do this stuff. And I'm able to send it out there because I'm preventing default behavior. If I undo this, so I don't have preventing default behavior, right? And if I go back and if I go Tom Smith, put the same data in here and contact number, and then tom@example.com, then what happens is if I click send, you see it briefly and then it's gone because it resets my form. It goes back by default to the, whatever I want. All right, so that is what this prevent default does. I want to point that out to you. Prevent default prevents the default behavior, right? Okay, so that is kind of most of what I wanted to cover today in terms of a little bit of validation, thinking about events. You can make different events occur, right? And I wanted to also cover this idea of preventing default behavior by adding an event listener. Remember what we do when we add an event listener, like kind of what it says here in the PowerPoint, which I really didn't cover too much, but I covered everything that's in here. One thing that it talks about is that it goes whenever we have an event, we have this thing called an event queue, and an event queue is almost like a separate process. And what happens is I have some kind of input, I have some kind of browser actions, and the browser actions generates an event. And what I can do in the event queue, I can process the event, and I can send some information back, let's say from the server, or do something on the client side, and respond back from the event queue back into to the browser, to the user, to let them know if something happened, right? Like what I've done. There's different kinds of events: browser events, network events, user events, timer events. We just talked about user events right now, things that we do: mouse clicks, mouse moves, and key presses. But there's other types. Browser events, we also saw the window loads, the window.load event, that kind of thing we saw. We use the add event listener to register an event. And when we register, we subscribe to the event. We're using something called the observer pattern in some ways to subscribe to the event. We can also use the onload function, and on click as an example, but this is kind of frowned upon these days. It's not really great. It's there, it works, but not recommended. It's better to use add event listener, and it's what I've shown you here. Add event listener for, let's say, for a click. Add event listener for a mouse over. Add event listener for a mouse out. And you can have multiple events that are registered to the same object, right? Because different things can happen to the object. I can click on it, I can drag it, I can update it, I can remove it, I can do different things, and I can respond to those kinds of events. And the idea behind the event handler is that when an event occurs, the browser calls some kind of an associated event handler that I can use. And usually the event handler is in the form of a function. Okay? Whether it's a function that is inline or a function that is a named function, it calls that event when an event is raised. So that is what event handling is all about for the most part, at a very high level. All right, so let's put this up on GitHub. So we did some basic form validation. So again, we're going to go here. We're going to say git add dot git commit -m added some form validation. Not complete, but we'd add some, and then git push. And that, my friends, is enough for your in-class exercise. So when you submit your in-class exercise, what I'm looking for is a couple of screenshots, all right, of your one or more screenshots of your site that kind of displays what we've done. And a good screenshot would be something like where you have both, let's say, your VS Code, as well as maybe on the right side, something that looks like this. And maybe you can show a couple of pages here. You might want to show maybe a wider shot where you have all the links that we did together for the home link, right? Where we did this kind of work. And then contact us link. That's one thing we forgot, that whole loading thing. We made it so that it's green or red. Notice that it did that. When every time we load, it's like this red area because we're hiding it. We can also hide it with CSS, which is another way of doing it instead of showing it the way we're doing. We're using JavaScript to hide it. And the other way to also do it is not use an alert, but put the alert on after. So show it, add the alert, and then remove the alert afterwards. Remove the class so it doesn't show that stuff. It's a little bit cleaner. So what I mean by that is, let's just do this last thing. Sorry, I know I'm running late. Bear with me, guys, one more minute, and then we'll be done. So my contact.html, instead of putting my alert danger in here, take it out, is what I'm saying, right? And we don't need a default message, right? But what we can do is we can add the alert in there as we need it, right? So again, going back to our app.js, then when I have the message area is shown, I could change what the message area says. So I could say message area dot, if I say class name, then I can type in the class name that I want. Message area, alert. It's alert danger, right? Which is what I want to show. So that's the alert that comes up. And then when I hide it, I want to take away the alert altogether. So I can say something like message area, and then let's remove, if I want to remove an attribute, I can remove an attribute called the class attribute, right? And then what they'll do is wipe away the class, and there'll be no more special, kind of thing that comes up. And this will take care of that red showing up momentarily, and then it's going to show you stuff, right? Let's see what that looks like instead. So again, if I load the form, it doesn't show anything now. If I go here and I press tab, it shows the alert. And then after, when I move on, right, so that adds the alert class to the message area. So if I move on from there, and let's say if I go Tom, then it moves and it's gone. It's not going to show the alert anymore. And when I enter my data, if I click send, it doesn't show this red thing, right? So that's the thing that I want to be able to do, right? So that's the fix. So let's just do that. So clear, I'll say git add dot git commit -m. I'll say cleaned up message area, right? And then git push. And now you can see, if you look online, find one final thing is if you look online and look at my Durham programmer, you can see if I refresh, I have like 9 commits. And this is how we move. This is how we work. We're kind of, it's keeping track of all of our work and how we're moving from one week to the other. Next week, what we're going to do is we're going to put up our site up online, which is one of the requirements you need to do. So how do I show this site on GitHub pages? How do I do that? So that's week 3's work. I'm going to show you how to do that stuff and what's required and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Again, just remember next week that early in the week, I'll release the test. The test will be due at the end of the week at some point, Friday or Saturday. And then you'll have 2 attempts to get your test completed. And it'll be a little quiz that's 15 to 20 questions. Again, that is, really you're looking at the PowerPoints and the stuff that I've covered in the videos. If I've covered it in the video, if I've talked about it, fair game for the quiz. Okay. All right. Any questions before we go for the day? Back to this. So any questions? I'm just going to end up with this screen. So Nicholas says you just want screenshots that include the code, not just zipping up the folder and sending it over. Yeah, I mean, I need a GitHub link. That would be nice. I actually asked for that. If you look at the in-class exercise, it says I want a GitHub link and 2 screenshots, a couple of screenshots, or a screenshot of your stuff. Can you go over the ICE submission again? Yeah. So so if you look at the ICE submission, it's pretty straightforward. Let's look at what I put in here. So under activities, if we look at ICE 1, it'll be the same for all of them, right? It says it's worth 2% of your final grade. Again, I'm taking the best 10 out of 12, if I'm not wrong. And it basically is due Friday, January 22nd, 2021. That's tomorrow night at midnight. So it gives you an extra day to fool around and to try stuff out. Follow the instructor in class with a template provided. Stuff we made together. That's the template. A zip archive of your project on DC Connect, a link to your GitHub repo, and 1 or more screenshots of your final output. That's it. No video. Okay, the video is strictly for your labs. Okay, so that should be everything you need. And that'll be the same format for every in-class exercise. All right, any other questions at all before we go for the day and for the week? You're getting an issue where you can still tab out of the name field. Okay, I'm gonna fix that issue, but I'm gonna say goodbye to the people watching on YouTube. So for those watching on YouTube, thank you so much. I'll see you next week. For the people in class, lecture is officially over. I'll see you guys next week as well, and I'll answer questions locally for those people who have individual questions now. All right, thank you so much for the people watching, and I'll see you next week. All right, so